Welcome everyone. It's Angelo Robles at Family Office, and for my members of SFO Continuity, of course, a special welcome. Well, we're having a guest on today. I know it feels like I say this all the time. I don't really have that many guests on as much this year, so hopefully when I do, they're very special. And today's guest I've known for many years. He's quite the figurehead within the family office community, and talk about a perfect, and I do mean perfect, tie-in to a lot of the things I talk about regarding AI and a lot of the concerns that many of you throw back at me, especially in the family office world, around, sure, AI sounds great, but how about cyber concerns? So this is going to be a very encompassing discussion with a very special guest, and I've given it a little bit of a teaser name: When Machines Hunt. AI, cybersecurity, and protecting the modern family office. It's a special conversation with Tony Gebely, CEO of Annapurna Security. Tony, finally getting you on the show. What a pleasure. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Angelo. Yeah, it's been a long time coming, but thanks for making the time, and it's a pleasure to have this opportunity to speak to you and your followers.
Thank you. And we'll have a tremendous opportunity to go through some, I think, pretty incredible questions for Tony. More importantly, his responses. And we'll weave in some of his background along the way. Again, he's been in the community for quite a long time, a figurehead in the community. A great pleasure to have him on. But I know you all want to get right to the questions. So on that note, Tony, we're going to roll up our sleeves and let's begin. The bar for these conversations, like, I don't know, 10 years ago, used to be, use a strong password. So you're telling families that the ground has fundamentally shifted. Maybe in one sentence as a bit of a teaser, something that a principal will actually remember. Effectively, what changed and why does it change everything for a family office specifically?
Yeah, in one sentence, I would say you need a cybersecurity program, and there's a lot to unpack there, but every family office of every size needs what we call a cybersecurity program. That's my one sentence.
Okay, and why don't we do a little bit of an unpacking with that? So a cybersecurity program, what does that look like? What does it entail?
Yeah, so it entails gluing together a number of different providers, which is a lot to bite off for a family office, but it's definitely required. So you need a managed service provider IT firm in your court that's going to be keeping all of your devices up to date. You need proper written procedures and policies for your staff. You need them to be properly educated. You need to just add layers of the onion on what used to just be a password. So when I say program, like that's in a nutshell what we're talking about. It's a number of different things. Typically, you need someone to own that program. You can't just farm it out to a third party. There are a lot of, unfortunately, firms in our space today that are kind of selling snake oil and saying, buy our service, buy our app, and we'll secure you and your family. It's not true. Cybersecurity requires a holistic approach because you are only as secure as your weakest link. And if you believe that, and you should, because it's true, you're only secure as your weakest link, then this is the only approach, is to build a holistic program to add layers to what you're trying to protect so that a bad actor can't get through all of those layers, because you will be attacked at some stage.
Let me build upon that. So a big institution, a big bank has a CISO, a Securities Operations Center, probably does red teaming, regulatory mandates. A single family office, and even many multifamily offices, defend what, 9 or 10-figure concentrated wealth with often a 3 to 5 person team and an outsourced IT vendor. Have family offices quietly become the softest value target in the world?
They absolutely have, because if I had $1 for every time I heard a family office executive tell me, "Oh, IT is handling cybersecurity," oh man, Angelo, I hear that echoing in the back of my head daily, and it's just not true. IT is a very crucial part of any cybersecurity program, but there's so many different other things that are necessary that your IT staff isn't going to bring to the table. They're not going to handle your cybersecurity insurance. They rarely handle your your policies and procedures and the business side and the governance side of cybersecurity. And they rarely handle the technology that's in the hands of the family members phones, tablets, personal laptops, home infrastructure. These are some of the weakest points that we're seeing. And when a family office says, oh, we have an IT provider and they handle our cybersecurity, it's just like, oh man, like that's great and all, but you need a little bit more than that. You need a little bit more of a holistic approach to this. Cybersecurity is not an IT problem; it's a business problem.
When you sit with a new family, what's the most common and most dangerous false belief that you have to dismantle, usually in your first 30 minutes?
Yeah, I would say that, reiterating what I just said, a lot of families just think it's an IT problem. But the other thing that comes up repeatedly is that the only risk with cyber is loss of money. And some families are just like, I don't really care if I lose 100 grand. It feels like too much work to just keep on top of this cybersecurity problem. But a lot of times the cybersecurity threat is the first step towards a physical threat. Physical security threats often start with information gathering, data breaches, business email compromise, and they're just gathering data on the family. There are some, one example I can give you is your home infrastructure. If you're not keeping it up to date, it can become vulnerable. So when I say keeping it up to date, the manufacturers put out patches to patch vulnerabilities every month. Now they're doing it even more frequently, and we'll talk about that later with AI. But if you're not patching your infrastructure, it becomes vulnerable. And you might say, like, who cares if my internet router is vulnerable? Well, if a bad actor gets into your home network, let's say that maybe their goal is to get onto a device after that, but they're not able to do that. Now they're in your network, though. They can tell what devices are on the network. So telling what devices are on your network gives a picture to a criminal of who is home at the time. So they know when you're home, when your kids are home, when they're not home, and that can lead directly to a physical threat. So the physical threat's real. The other thing that a lot of families don't realize is that not just loss of funds and physical threat, but also reputation damage. So if information gets out there that you don't want to be out in the public arena about your family, your health, your relationships, anything like that, it could damage your reputation, not only as a family, but like as a business person. People may not want to do business with you. People may not want to enter deals with you if they see that you're sloppy with your data and your cybersecurity efforts. So there are pretty big wake up calls that we put in front of families early on. The families that a lot of families work with know this when they come to the table, and they're afraid and they're trying to figure out what the next steps are, and we help them through that. But the ones that don't, they're alarmed quite quickly by this conversation.
Of course. I mean, you beat me to the punch on my next question in terms of that families are very alert to quote unquote physical threats and relatively prepared for it. And I think digital, with the rise of what we're going to talk about in our next segment in 1 or 2 minutes, AI, and not just the monetary part, as you noted, but the areas that could lead to an enhanced risk of physical threat, as well as reputational and other risks that could be devastating to the family and its psyche. And there are no easy solutions, but putting their head in the sand and ignoring it. And you mentioned, a smaller team, which even a lot of billion-dollar-plus families are, they don't have the internal resources to have someone dedicated to this, and relying on their IT provider. Well, I mean, I'll use a word, you are being a little bit kind. It's bordering on being comical. I'm not saying that there may be some that may not bring in the right person, or on a larger scale, maybe even have it internal. Although honestly, my experience, those things would be very rare. For a part, they want to control the relationship. They want to have more monetary gain potentially for them. Therefore, they're less likely to have that engagement with someone like you. How are you getting through the barriers of explaining the digital risk, the rise of AI, the challenges with bad actors, and again, the layers potentially going through to the actual decision maker in the family office or the family?
I mean, to be honest with you, the outlook for family offices and ultra net worth families is pretty dismal. I would say that the majority of families are handling this in a very immature manner. shrugging it off.
Agreed.
And I think partially because it feels to them as if it's something that's insurmountable. And that's why I go back to the idea of a program. A program is something that lives and breathes, right? And that's what you want to stand up in the face of cybersecurity. You don't want to just check a box or buy a piece of software or do a one-time activity. So I would say that educating a family on the nature of this needs to be an ongoing thing, and it is possible to protect yourself. And hey, it's not just about protecting yourself. It's about knowing what to do when it does hit the fan. They need to be trained, the family members, the family office executives, on who to call, what to do when it hits. I mean, this is called an incident response plan. Very few family offices have one, but they need to be written, stored offline, and exercised yearly, so a family knows what to do if in the face of an event. So it is probably quite difficult to prevent all natures of cybersecurity incidents, but adding layers to, I keep using an analogy, like using layers of the onion, where you're reducing the threat impact if something does happen, and then you know what to do if it does happen, is something that every family office should be prepared for, especially in the face of AI today.
Well, you mentioned some interesting words there. A word that I use is 0 hour. And some of the work for my more and more consultative work that I would do with families. So you're 100% correct. I hinted at red teaming a little bit earlier. Is your family office really excellent? And let's face it, I'm going to ask them, they're all going to say they're excellent, but the law of math and numbers is going to say that most are average. They have potential to be good, very good, and excellent. Following my Peter Drucker-like principles and now incorporating AI, from my perspective, we'll get to the risk of that as well. But many of them don't. They get complacent, they get comfortable, and they're arguably a little bit understaffed. AI could help on that, but maybe that's for a little bit of a different discussion, and overworked. I get it. But nonetheless, you would want to be excellent in terms of what you do, and having a major breach or a problem is going to be devastating. Talk a little bit about what I would call 0 hour. You're more of a crisis response. Like one example that I can maybe cue you up on is in conversations with a principal. I may be coming into the family office the next day, which happens to be a lighter day. They check the calendar, and we effectively role play a scenario of the principal is down, or this happened in a cyber attack. We don't look to, I got you per se, but we have to make them realize there's vulnerabilities, and what could we do to then be more systematic in terms of enhancing, limiting that area of surface, that threat surface, and shoring things up. How do you handle that?
We have an annual tabletop exercise with the families that we work with, and each employee has a copy of the incident response plan in their hand, and the whole idea is to exercise that. So, something, the principal can't reach us and something needs to happen, or, the whole office is down because of ransomware. The principal just suffered from business email compromise. We just wired $100,000 to, Hong Kong. We just bring up these real world scenarios, and the executives have to answer, what do we do next? And then what we do is we throw wrenches in and say, okay, you did that, but then this happened. And it just keeps evolving the situation. It's really not that, it's really dynamic. It's really interesting. Everybody has fun with it. But we always find holes in the incident response plan, and we patch them up. If we would have known that we could have done this instead, it would have protected us from X sort of scenarios. And you can only really find that out by exercising that plan. First, you have to have a plan, and we know very few family offices do. But that's how we come across that subject and help families and family offices be prepared.
Of course, that makes a lot of sense. And my approach was maybe more, and I know it sounded a little harsh to some, a little bit more of a first time. And then, like you said, it's a little bit more collaborative in terms of building a plan, having solutions, having follow-up that is a little bit more structured and pre-planning, so to speak, going into it. But let's move on to a little bit of where the audience is probably expecting of me, and trying to keep it in the first 15 minutes that I am. And that is effectively AI as the attacker. So I'm going to hope my audience knows when I mention Anthropic, some pronounce it mythos, some mythos, that you kind of know what I'm talking about. The most powerful AI model ever built that many of you have never seen. Some of you seen variations via Fable 5, but many of you only saw that for 2.5 days until it was pulled. So the Anthropic Mythos class models are, by their own account, effectively kind of superhuman at finding and exploiting software vulnerabilities. And right now, they're locked inside the Project Glasswing, to be a little technical, with the quote unquote defenders, the chosen firms of quasi Anthropic and the US government. Walk us through what happens to the world the day a bad actor gets inevitably a Mythos equivalent, maybe one of the more fast improving open weight Chinese models, but eventually that genie's going to come out of the bottle.
I would argue it's already happened. GLM 5.2 came out the day after the US government said that they weren't going to release Fable and held Mythos captive, right? So, and that is open sourced. There's no guardrails on that. So, even when Mythos and Fable come out, and if you start to ask it questions about like, hey, look for vulnerabilities in my software. I promise it's my software, and it might help you, but there's guardrails built in where it might suspect that you're a bad actor and stop. But these Chinese open weight models are going to be wide open, and we're already seeing an increase in the number of vulnerabilities that have been found in some of the most boring pieces of software that are running the infrastructure behind the very core of the internet today. Some pieces of software have been around for 10 or 15 years, and we're finding bugs that are that old that no human has ever found. That is super alarming. Like, this is the moment to be freaked out about cybersecurity. And it's not hopeless, even though it kind of feels hopeless. It's all about those layers of the onion. But back to the problem at hand, you have all these vulnerabilities coming out, and a lot of these underlying packages that like built the internet for servers and Linux and such that are open source, that are maintained by volunteers, they're becoming overwhelmed by vulnerability reports. And they're using AI to patch the vulnerabilities at the same time. So it's just going to be an arms race for a really long time. And you have to expect that software at every level is going to be vulnerable at some stage. And there's likely going to be vulnerabilities that we don't even know about. And what I mean by that is there's always been a digital arms race to collect zero-day vulnerabilities. Zero-day vulnerability is a vulnerability wherein the manufacturer of software doesn't know it exists. And previously, all of the major manufacturers of software would have bug bounty programs where you, as a good guy hacker, could find a vulnerability, take it to Google, take it to Apple, and say, I found this vulnerability in iOS. And they'll say, great job, here's $150,000. Some hackers make their living that way. What's happened over the past 10 years is that nation states started to buy these 0 days from hackers. So Russians, North Koreans, the Chinese government, they started to buy these 0-day vulnerabilities from bad actors without any knowledge of the Googles and Apples of the world, knowing that they even exist. So that's already happened. That's been happening for years, and that's usually used against other countries, political dissidents, activists, etc. But now we're putting that capability in the hands of literally everyone that can operate a computer to some degree will be able to find vulnerabilities. And yes, they will become harder and harder to find as we go on, because again, it's an arms race and both sides have the tool. But right now is like this inflection point where we're just seeing a ridiculous influx in vulnerabilities and no one can keep up. And it's super scary at every level.
100%. Let's do a little bit of an AI deep dive, maybe a pinch of a detour. My audience knows that I talk about sovereign, owning your hardware, having access to systems that never touch the cloud for a variety of reasons. And we're seeing it a little bit with that before mentioned Fable 5 at Anthropic. Effectively, the US government and or the company could stop the spigot and you lose access to it. The frontier models are awesome. I love them. I use them. But I do understand I need to also have a level of control of my own systems. So if I'm talking about having the proper hardware and I want to also control my cost and not get caught into the trap of Anthropic's ever rising cost, and that's not going to go down from all these companies using open weight models. Now, we don't want to make it overly technical. We could talk about Olama, Hugging Face, downloading true open weight models, but these are still ever powerful programs, usually from China, although NVIDIA's new program is showing a lot of promise. But you mentioned GLM 5.2, which is a powerhouse, but 99.999% of everyone out there is not going to have the hardware horsepower to completely download the full open weight. Now, there is a way you could stagger multiple machines together. Again, maybe a subject for a different time. But Tony, here's my bigger point. I want you, they're used to hearing me, I want you to explain, you better, especially with these Chinese models, you better control the complete download properly of the open weight, as opposed to, oh, but it's just easier and I don't need the hardware just to API to a GLM 5.2 or another Chinese model. Why you would, or maybe not, but why you would highly recommend that you do not do that.
You want to have it on your own infrastructure, not in any sort of control by a foreign government. I mean, that's the heart of what we're talking about here, right? And that's the core of sovereignty. Like, you want to own your data. You want to make sure that that thing's not phoning home, sending data somewhere else. And you can actually do that by putting it on infrastructure you own, as Angelo said. And it is quite costly to set that up, and it's going to rise in cost to set that up because these models are going to become larger and larger. There is another option. You can actually rent computer speed and time, CPU cycles in the cloud to run this stuff. That becomes very expensive as well. But if you want your privacy and your sovereignty, that is one flavor of a way to get to it. But yeah, you never want to be running these open weight models in the cloud that provided them. You want to download them onto your own infrastructure.
And back a little bit to it's not just Claude Mythos and potentially GLM 5.2, but also OpenAI. The US government restricted their 5.6. I'm, again, simplifying some of the things here to keep the conversations going. Yeah. When you're advising a family or your current clients, going back to them in the last 30 days, when all of this 45 days really started to evolve, are you having emergency white papers for them, one-on-ones? Because this has changed everything, and some of it is already quote unquote out there, and there's no putting that genie back. It's going to get out there because the US is going to have to keep up with the Chinese open weight models. I never thought I would have said that 6 months ago from that perspective, but it's beginning sadly to look that way. How are you addressing this with your current clients and tightening things up, for lack of a better word?
Yeah. So we're working with all of our clients, MSPs or internal IT staff, and making sure that their patching cadence is ridiculously quick. We can't just do once a month patching anymore. Like, those days are gone. Vulnerabilities are popping out in every single system, from your hardware down to your operating system and your third-party software you're running on your machine. We need to have our IT staff reading reports, staying on top of this like every single day. And if something comes out, they need to patch it as soon as possible, sometimes without even testing if it's that much of a severe vulnerability with infrastructure. And most family offices lack the resources to have this role, right? It is a role, and most managed service provider IT firms have this role. It's a person that's looking at threat intelligence daily, looking at tools that they're using across all their clients to see what's vulnerable and what patterns they're seeing. Like, that's a huge win for a small family office that can't afford their own IT staff when you outsource that piece of it. Again, it's not the whole, kit and caboodle, but the IT provider does provide a very important piece of this puzzle. The other thing that we're talking to families about is around their their AI strategy. Most family offices don't have an AI strategy.
No kidding.
Well, if you don't have an AI strategy, like, that's the risk. Doing nothing is the big risk. And I'll give you an example. One family we work with, they have a number of operating companies. They have several hundred employees. We were able to run a tool that the MSP brought to the table, and we determined that half of their staff were using AI tools. Half, and I'm talking about several hundred employees, right? So this number is quite high. Now, the family office has not purchased any sort of AI solution for their staff.
I know where this is going.
Yeah.
Please continue.
So exactly. So if that's the case, then there's probably like a 95% chance, unless they're expensing it, that these staff members are using the free version of all of these tools. And I don't know if you know this yet, but the free versions train their models with your data. It is the worst case scenario for a family. You have to be using the enterprise version of all these platforms. But let's back up. It all starts with a strategy. You need to define your risk appetite. Do you even want to use the Claudes and OpenAIs of the world? Or do you want to host stuff internally and pull it behind your walls and air gap it? It's all dependent upon your risk appetite and your budget for these items. But you need to have a strategy. Every family needs to have a strategy. You cannot ignore this problem. The family that I just referenced that ignored it has half their staff just pouring data into the tool. So that's where we are today. If you don't have an AI strategy, like, we need to talk. We need to talk months ago. But if you're still behind, there's still time. Let's have the conversation.
99% of family offices don't have that. They don't really know about AI. Even the employees that are not being properly trained effectively are doing basic prompts and not even maximizing getting the best response, let alone on outdated models or free models of varying weaker programs that are still often 3 to 6 months behind. And not understanding how to go from chat to doing things and creating proper applications, agents, and really having proper workflows and having a structure. Now, we have different roles within that AI service to the family, but they're obviously very complementary. I don't do cybersecurity, but it's beyond an important topic that coincides and weaves together with more of a structured AI policy. I mean, I go around the world talking, Tony, and obviously I lead AI masterclasses. I think I'm at the forefront in terms of family office thought leadership relative to AI. And even the work that I output when I speak in front of 100 families digitally or in person, I'll get 2 or 3%, like 2 or 3 that will reach out and be somewhat serious. It's a concern, especially from your end on cyber, because even if they're not implementing some of the things that we're talking about to be a more advantageous SFO, which would be foolish on their part, this is not going to stop the bad guys from using the Mythos or Mythos-like services around the world, the open weight models, to attack them. So they're going to be very, very vulnerable, and a lot of them just don't realize that.
That's right.
So security, which is building upon that. Security has always been asymmetric. The defender has to be right every time. The attacker just once. AI drops the cost of trying, quote unquote, with the bad guys, often smart bad guys, to near zero, and lets an adversary probe continuously, autonomously at scale. How is a small single family office, entrepreneur, entity, foundation, how are they going to win against that math?
Yeah, so the major way that they win, and this is often brought in by their IT provider, is by utilizing what we call next generation antivirus. And what these platforms are today, they're way more advanced than antivirus. They're what we like to use is MDR, managed detection and response. And these tools will not only look for viruses and malware, but they'll also look for vulnerable systems, vulnerable pieces of software. They'll look for anomalous activity. So, if your average day is like 500 megabytes up to the cloud and 500 megabytes down, and today like 10 gigabytes left your machine, anomaly, right? So what these tools do with their anomalies is they throw them into a security operations center, and AI will go through them and try to figure out if they're real or not. And then sometimes they'll go down to a human for real investigation. These companies, their whole goal is to stay on top of this risk environment for small businesses and in larger businesses too, but this is their modus operandi. So they're out there, looking at what's being attacked. They're seeing it across all their clients. This is just one piece of the puzzle, but this is an easy ish way to get ahead of the curve with a lot of these issues. Now, it goes to the managed detection and response software goes to a security operations center. So you need that piece of it. Like there has to be a human somewhere that's receiving these alerts. And the alert could be, your Adobe's out of date. It's 3 versions behind, and the version you're on is being actively exploited in the wild. It would know this. So then a human will, they'll try to actually update it for you. And if that can't happen remotely, then they'll call you and walk you through it. So it's kind of like a partnership with your IT firm and this security operations center. So that's like the major way that families, small families with not a lot of IT experience are overcoming maybe like 60% of the issues.
We're going to come back to that, but someone is asking in a private text to me who's listening, and I think it's a good question, and some of the things I talk about in my AI programming and master classes, but I'm going to throw it at you, and you hinted at it. So that question is going to be effectively, Angelo and or Tony, I'm using Frontier for now because they're convenient and they're quote unquote all powerful models. I get it. I don't own it. I'm renting the service. What's the safest way for me to utilize that? Now, again, I know you hinted at it. Don't go on the free plan. Go on a pay plan. Check the box that you don't want your quote unquote training data. Become an enterprise client. Or, as he's noting, a little more fluid, do I go on it through Amazon's Bedrock and I have kind of a container relative around my Frontier models? I'm going to allow you to really dig a little deep into this one because this is really at the core for a lot of the people in my audience. I'll hand the floor to you.
Yeah. So the question is, do they put it into Bedrock and not use the provided by the manufacturer service, right? That's the core of the question.
That's the core, yeah.
Yeah, so they're like, let's talk about a risk continuum, right? There's you're using the service provided by the service provider on their own infrastructure. You're moving it into the cloud on another piece of infrastructure, Amazon, AWS, or any sort of like specifically architected SaaS solution for running Frontier models, which is a little less risky, because there's still like somebody still owns your data. It's not sovereign, but it's away from the company that made it. And then, let's go the other end of the continuum is you have it hosted yourself on your own environment in your office, not connected to the internet, only connected to your local network. So, I mean, that's from most risky to least risky. That's how I would, put this out there. It's not just the Amazons of the world. There are specific software platforms that you can, rent speed. You can spin up a virtual machine, run some models, do your work, and then literally like destroy it, and it goes into the ether. You can do it that way too. There are a bunch of different flavors to get at it. The safest is to run it on your infrastructure in your office. And I know we've been saying for years that the cloud is safer and you should move everything to the cloud. This is one instance where, the whole reason behind us saying this in the security space today is because the only way that AI is the most useful is if we give it all of our data. Like the more data we give it, the more useful it becomes, but the more risky it becomes, right? So that's why we're in this position. Like we're the all-knowing oracle of your office is your AI. You've given it everything. It knows everything, but you have to control it somehow. And some families might say, like, what's the risk? What if I don't? Like, what if my data's out there? And, we've talked about bad actors. There's also like the state risk. The US government could subpoena any one of these companies and ask for your data if they think that you're doing something wrong. Like that should freak you out, right? Like, and you could be like, oh, I'm not really doing anything wrong. There's a quote from, I believe it's some guy from the Kremlin said it a bunch of years ago, like, show me the man and I'll show you the crime, right? So if anybody doesn't like you or the way that you are conducting business in wherever you live, if they have your data, they will find a reason to make bad things happen to you. And, I hate to say that, but we're seeing that sentiment increase in governments globally and even in the US, which is crazy, but it's happening.
100%. These are all things I talk about, including in my sovereign risk and disaster preparedness upcoming future masterclass and handbook for family offices. And I get it. I wear my libertarian values, I guess some would say, on my sleeve. And the more that I hear of government involvement, the more that I hear about their control over what's going on at OpenAI and Anthropic relative to the models and containing them, the more I realize how right I am that, and again, I use the models. I do love Frontier, but I'm careful even in the enterprise and the AWS Bedrock that I use in terms of how I use it. I do it for some high level deep reasoning and orchestration, but much of my execution and most proprietary data is completely sovereign on open weight models, usually US models, and never, quote unquote, touching the cloud. I would rather own my gold than have it through an ETF. That's important to me and maybe not as important to some of you. That's your choice to make. Turning the direction a little bit, Tony, although a little bit related, AI can clone a principal's voice, maybe from a few seconds of appearing on a podcast, and their face from public photos. So imagine the controller gets a call unmistakably the principal's voice, authorizing a wire. How does a family build, I guess, what I would call verification that survives the perfect impersonation?
Yeah, the perfect impersonations are out there. I mean, it's happening. Let's start with what you do to prevent that from happening. So you have to know if you're, I mean, you know, if your family's out there, like, is the principal on YouTube everywhere? Is he or she famous? Like those are things like if they're out there, then there's not much you can do. But if they're not out there, then you need to like try to maintain that. And even something as silly, like if the family has a very low profile and there's not there's literally nothing on them on the internet as far as voice or video, make sure that their voicemail recording is not their own voice. Like make it like whatever your phone carrier's default is. You don't want to get any audio out there whatsoever. There's been incidents where cyber criminals have used the voicemail greeting of a principal to clone their voice and authorize wire transfers. And it's not just voice. In 2024, there was a very high profile, it was a video deepfake CFO for a major architecture firm called Arup. They actually designed the Sydney Opera House. They're well known. They wired $25 million away because the CFO on video authorized it. So it's happening. It's real. So you need to be calling to verify the numbers, the account numbers on a known good number. And when I say known good number, I mean, this is a number you've used before. It wasn't just sent to you in an email. It's, something that's in your contact list. And then you want to be having some sort of like verbal password verification.
Exactly.
Come up with some word or phrase that you use with family members. Exactly, a code word. And this is going to just stop, 90% of this, and you're going to be okay. There are several software platforms that are working to authenticate people out there. I think one of them is called Walrus Fi, Walrus the animal, FI, like financial software. And they actually have a guarantee where if you transfer money and it doesn't reach point B, you'll get your money back because they're verifying both parties on your behalf using their technology. So, we're seeing some larger firms, some MFOs, starting to use that sort of software platform. There are a couple of them out there to assist in this arena and just offload that risk. So that's another option for you.
And related to that, and building upon it, actually, the rising generation, it feels like they live entirely in the public. Their voice, their face, their location, their relationships. Are we raising the most clonable, most socially engineerable generation in history? And what do you tell the family and that rising generation about the effectively what I would define the children or grandchildren's digital exhaust?
We just make them aware of it. Like, we're not going to stop it, right? The good part is that the younger generation is typically more attuned to the cyber risk. There are a lot of next gens that come to us and say, we want to work with you. Help us convince our parents who especially run the family office that we need to take cybersecurity seriously. Like we see that a lot. So I think that's on our side. But just knowing what the risks are and knowing, putting slight guardrails around it, making, if you want to be a public figure, great. If you're going to be a public figure, don't post your real time anything. Like I'm here right now. You don't do that, right? Like put some delay on, manufacture it a little bit. It's going to be okay. If you're a little bit more private and you're not a public figure, have private accounts. And if you can't just switch your accounts to private on social, you can, right? But when you do that, you need to go back through all your followers and make sure you know them all. So it's all about your risk appetite. But we effectively are raising the generation that everything's out there. There's data exhaust everywhere for this generation, whereas most older generations, were born pre-internet, and the first chunk of their lives has no data exhaust. But all of the later generations post-internet, like everything's out there. It's all just in some database. Governments and companies are buying up your data and cross-referencing it and creating dossiers on you. It's all happening. It's the real deal.
Changing directions a little bit, I call this maybe the $50 solution. Let's talk a little bit about what YubiKeys are and stop relying potentially on phone codes. For a principal or a person who's never heard of one, explain why a whatever $50, $100 piece of metal may be the most important thing that's such low-hanging fruit that they do all year.
Yeah, good point. And this is something we're trying to institute with all the families we work with. And it's quite easy. It's an elegant solution for authentication. And let me just step back. Like the reason you want to implement it's called a hardware key, right? It looks like this. This is a YubiKey.
Yep.
You put in your machine and you tap this button and it sends a private key to whatever service you're interacting with. And the reason we're doing this is because it's phishing resistant. And you might say, well, we have multi-factor authentication in place, and we should be phishing resistant. Well, that's not really the case anymore. Now, Microsoft's taking some steps against that and having you type in a number these days if you have it configured to do so, but a lot of other systems aren't. And if you're social engineered to give up your 6-digit code that you've received from your authenticator app or your phone, that bad actor's in. Like that's how business email compromise happens 9 times out of 10 these days. Even with multi-factor authentication in, somebody gets a bad link, they click it, they put their username and password in. That goes into, and this can be run by AI, right? So let's say it's all run by AI. AI sends a bazillion people a link. It's a numbers game. Maybe 15 click it. They click it. They go to this website, looks like Microsoft 365 login. They type in their username and password. The AI receives username and password, puts it in the actual login. You get a 6-digit code. You put it in the form as well. They get that too, and they put it in there in the real form, and boom, they're in as you. Like that's it. Like that's all it's required. It's like 60 seconds, and you're hacked. Even with MFA, because everybody thinks like, oh, we're good. We have MFA turned on. These keys prevent that sort of attack because they have a cryptographic key inside of them that matches the other side, the website you're trying to log into. Like they have a handshake where the public key is stored on the website you're logging into and the private keys in here, and some crazy complex math happens and then the website unlocks. So this key can only open the websites you've configured it with. So if you tried to use this on a fictitious login screen for a website you've set it up on, it will not work. It will not send anything to there. So that's why these are so great, because we keep seeing business email compromise with some of our clients that haven't implemented these, and it's like this is the way. Like just give this to people, and you can actually remove passwords if you put this in place. This could be your password. So we have clients where they're using Microsoft Intune, which means if it's configured correctly, they can only log into the Office 365 and all the attached services with their company-approved devices. So that's one piece of authentication. You add this on top of it, and then they can log in. So you need this and a specific device to log in. And if you configure it correctly, you can take away a password and never use a password again using Microsoft. And it's actually more secure.
Yeah, the YubiKeys, which are so simple, like you described. I'm definitely a fan of as well. Let's talk a little bit about SIM swapping. Let someone call a carrier, become you, intercept your codes. Why is the entire SMS as a security model kind of fundamentally broken? And why are still sophisticated private banks still telling on themselves by relying on it?
It's unbelievable how many banks still rely on SMS. It's beyond me. And it just, maybe their infrastructure is just that outdated. But any major bank, any private client division should be sending their clients like keys, physical keys, or using an authenticator mechanism that's app based. So the reason you don't want to use SMS for multi-factor authentication is because of what Angelo just said. You can call a cell phone provider, social engineer them, and basically transfer a number to you. Now, they're becoming more and more aware of this the more it happens. Sure. But the one thing that you can do to prevent this is you can call your cell phone provider and add a PIN that they need to receive to make any changes to your account. So it's, you have your password to log into like Verizon or T-Mobile, but yeah, it's another level. And we make sure that all of our clients do it for every employee and principal. This will prevent that from happening. But another thing that makes SMS horrible is that it's not encrypted by default. Now, very recently, you could talk to Android and iPhone devices in one chat, and it should be end-to-end encrypted. You need to double check that, but this was like within a few months ago. But for years, anyone that was using SMS to talk between iPhone and Android was not end-to-end encrypted. iPhones, if the whole family's on iPhones, you're end-to-end encrypted. But the sovereignty piece is important here too. Like, you can own your communication. Like, it doesn't have to live in some cell phone provider's SMS service forever. A lot of families are using Signal to speak to one another right now. It's an open source solution. It's quite elegant. We don't really see anybody self-hosting and like truly owning it. But if you're using Signal, like, you basically own it. It's encrypted. They can't see what's on there. They have zero knowledge of what you're talking about. You can delete things. You can make your messages expire. But SMS is a horrible technology. It's like 20, 30 years old by now, maybe older. And we need to stop using it wholesale.
Completely agree. And glad you brought up Signal. That was going to be one of my questions. Again, if we had 2 or 3 hours, everyone, we do a really deep dive. Tony may be nice enough to give us an extra 10 minutes. So we have about 20 minutes to go. We're going to go a little bit round robin because I think there's still a fair amount of things that we have to cover. So biometrics, talk about something that might have been really cool a couple of years ago, but sold as the answer. No one can steal your face. Well, but now AI can spoof. Exactly that. Is biometric authentication a real root of trust, or simply a convenience layer that we're now dangerously kind of over trusting?
It depends on the mechanism. So Apple actually uses, I don't know what the exact technology is, like it's beyond me, but they're using some sort of like depth, like kind of like a radar sort of thing to like notice like the depth of your face. It's not just like a picture of you that it's seeing to recognize your face. So the Apple's version of facial recognition is quite sophisticated. I'm not too worried about AI taking that over, but what I don't like about biometrics is, especially for crossing borders, is the ability for a third party or a bad actor to take your device from you, hold it in front of your face while you may be restrained, and access whatever's on your phone. So I actually recommend not using biometrics, especially when crossing borders or traveling to some place that might not be as safe as your own home, just for that very reason. You really don't want to have your device removed from your person while you're crossing border. And this is a little bit of a tangent, but it's something we advise our families on. If your device was ever taken from you at a border crossing for more than 5 or 6 minutes, consider it compromised and throw it out and get a new one. Well, commercial spyware allows any sort of government. Almost every single government globally today has a contract with a commercial spyware provider. And if they suspect anything of you, they can take your device from you at the border, plug something into it, install spyware, or exfiltrate data. If you have an Apple phone, laptop, tablet, you can turn on lockdown mode that prevents this. And you can also turn on advanced data protection on iCloud, which is another layer of the onion. So we recommend that all the families we work with, whenever they're traveling, that they turn off Face ID or any sort of biometrics, and that they turn on lockdown mode. That's the end of my tangent.
Great idea. No, that's a great tangent. I'm glad you went on it. So I know it sounds a little outdated now compared to some of the things we just spoke about, but everyone says use a password manager, but it becomes the master key to the family's entire life, possibly. How do you secure the one thing that kind of secures everything, Tony?
Yeah, with a really good password. I mean, the technology's proven. I don't have any issues with it. I think that if you have a huge master password, and it should be like, we recommend passphrases, like a long sentence or like a combination of 6 or 8 words that, it shouldn't be like the first line of a Beatles song. Like, let's be real. Like, it should be some sort of interesting or unique set of words. It's way more powerful than remembering like crazy like characters, uppercase, lowercase, etc. But if you have a strong master password, everything's encrypted with that password. You should be very safe from a cybersecurity perspective. There are other ways in, right? So let's say your computer was hacked and a bad actor put like screen recording software on there. And then now they can see your screen. Well, they can, if you ever like turn off the stars on your password and see what the password is, now they have your passwords, or maybe one at a time, whatever's on the screen, right? So there are other ways to get at passwords, but password managers are they're proven technology. You have to look at the provider you're using and make sure that they are having some sort of assessment done on them at least yearly, and that they're providing the results of that assessment publicly. When I last checked, I believe 1Password and Bitwarden were the only ones that were publicly releasing the results of their vulnerability assessments online. And the security community really got behind them on that. So I think that that's a really good way forward for a family. And let's go back to that continuum idea. There's, the Post-it note, there's reusing your passwords, there's my little notebook full of passwords, there's using the browser to store passwords, and then there's the password manager. So like from least secure to most secure, I would say password manager is, one of the most secure ways to manage your passwords.
And although we hinted at it earlier, obviously, yes, I am a fan of sovereignty, of ownership, of spending the money to have the hardware, of upkeep, of controlling, lots of through use of open weight, properly structured AI models to get an incredible 168-hour-a-week advantage. But let's also be a little fair to the other side. By doing that, by spending more money on hardware, by needing a little bit more resources to build out, it's not like I'm totally without any security risk. We mentioned YubiKey, properly structured, secure location with protocol for entry, for exit. I get it. But there still is going to be some risk that everything is on that hardware and that may be subject to multiple forms of attack as well, let alone, and I know I'm making this a multifaceted question, if I do have everything on my hardware, my God, suppose something happens to that hardware. Talk a little bit about eloquent hard backups or really hyper private secured, maybe not your quite most proprietary info in the cloud. How do you look at that as kind of a 1, 2, 3 or more steps to be secure when you're hardware centric and sovereign centric?
Yeah, great question. And I'm going to use the continuum analogy once again. So most secure is it's air gapped. So it's not even connected to the internet. It's on your local area network, right? Next, like a little bit less secure, because obviously not connected to the internet is ultimately secure, is you wrap it in a VPN. So the only way you can get into it is if you VPN to your office, and then from there you can interact with that machinery. But then we need to talk about like the machinery itself. Like there's going to be some sort of computer, some sort of server that's running these open weight models. The operating system on that thing needs to be kept up to date. The firmware for all of the hardware components need to be kept up to date. In the same way we keep all the other things in our lives up to date. The software that you're running the LLM through, maybe Olama, et cetera, need to be kept up to date. So all of that stuff, someone needs to be monitoring and keeping up to date. And then you need that next generation antivirus on that device to, make sure that everything's in check as well. So, then you go down to like the least secure version of like hosting your own infrastructure is just pop it on a server. Everybody's hitting it from outside using your office's IP address. I mean, it's a disaster. You don't want to be doing that. That's exposing it to the internet. Whenever you expose something to the internet, there will be things scanning it multiple thousands of times a day to see if it's vulnerable. Every IP address that exists is scanned tons of times a day to see what's behind it. Can I get into it? Is it hackable? If it returns like a what are you IP address? Oh, I'm a Dell server from this year and I'm running this version of Windows. Then the next step is like, is this vulnerable? Have they patched it, et cetera? So when you expose something to the internet, you need to wrap it in a VPN. So that's like the continuum of hosting your own infrastructure. And there are a lot of different areas that need to be handled, which is why we, for years, recommended that people not host their own infrastructure. And for everything else, like files and email, we still recommend that you use cloud services for that. But if you want your AI sovereign because you're sharing much more with it than you would in an email, than you would on your SharePoint, et cetera, then you should consider this aspect.
What do you recommend for secure, hyper-secure emails? We're told about Proton, but there are some people that have poked some holes in that theory, maybe through, I don't know, government subpoenas and things like that. Nonetheless, what would you recommend?
Great question. So I would, and this is different from what most family offices think is the best. And it goes back to the state threat that we talked about a little bit earlier, which is an entirely different 2-hour conversation that you and I can have, Angelo, because I think we think a lot in the same way. For email to be the most secure from not only hackers, you want it to be encrypted, but you want it to be free from the possibility of state surveillance. You want to go today to an EU-based encrypted email provider. There are a bunch of them. I'm not going to name names on this call. You just have to Google it and do your own research. Proton is, I believe, out of Switzerland. But you want to look to an area of the world, and the EU is that area right now where they're taking digital privacy seriously.
Surprisingly, but yes.
And there are a number of EU companies and even the French government that are trying to de-Americanize their technology stack. And when you take away Microsoft and you take away Google and you take away Apple, there's not a whole hell of a lot left. And there are folks in the EU that are trying to change that right now. So I would say to look towards the EU for that. Make sure it is a privacy-centric company. Make sure that they have zero history of sharing data with foreign governments or any sort of like major breaches. Make sure they're SOC 2 Type 2 certified, ISO 27001 because they'll be in the EU. These are things you want to be looking for. But you start to break apart the model, right? Like if my email is going to be there, but I still use Excel, PowerPoint, and it's in Word, and it's all like getting shared in OneDrive and SharePoint. Like now you have this split model, right? And things start to break apart quite quickly. So families that are worried about that aspect of surveillance in their life, and they want to get away from the American companies, there are ways to piece things together, but it comes with a lot of friction. I mean, there are a very few platforms that interface very well with all of the people you're going to be doing business with today, but that's going to change.
And okay, let's have a little fun, Tony. How safe am I from a privacy perspective with Alexa, with the current Siri on my iPhone? I mean, if the entity or a government really wanted to potentially watch or listen into aspects of my conversations, and you hinted at it with some differences with the EU, the US, where Apple may be selling their product. There's a lot of moving parts there that we could have fun and do a 1 hour on. But why don't you just be honest in 1 or 2 minutes about how private we really are when someone like a really bad state actor or government really wants to spy on us?
Well, the US government can get that data from the companies without a warrant.
Yeah, that says it all. Yes.
I mean, they drop the mic. I mean, that's it. Like, that sucks. Like, that's not good for anybody, right? And everybody says like, oh, but there's anonymity in numbers. But like, AI is going to break that down, right? Like, if a government is aggregating all this data and they want to like give me 1,000 people that think this is a good idea, or give me a list of all the people that vote this way, or all sorts of things can be like once your data is aggregated, so your location data is being sold to companies. The U.S. government can obtain a lot of your data from a lot of services without a warrant. As this stuff is stored in databases that AI is attached to, and you remember all the Doge stuff where Musk and his crew were like literally exfiltrating tons of U.S. government data from government systems, and like then it just stopped being news. Like, where the hell is all that data? There's definitely AI on top of it, and it may at one point in time in the future or now be used for nefarious purposes, and that should freak all of us out. Like the internet was once this like free and open world for creativity and self-expression, and it's becoming a massive surveillance machine and storing everything you do, and it's becoming more and more accessible to governments and bad actors, and that should freak everybody out.
Of course. Tony, we're going to do 5 questions in 5 minutes. Here we go. Every counterparty, the lawyers, the accountants, the MSP, the wealth platform is a door into that quote unquote family. The family may have wonderful, doubtful, but wonderful cybersecurity, but maybe those they deal with don't. How should a family think about vendor risk when their own security risk is only as strong as their weakest advisor?
That's right. Huge problem. So part of every cybersecurity program is a vendor risk management program. And at its core is a list of all of your vendors and what they have access to and who manages that relationship. And from there, we take a look in priority order of the companies that have the access to the most data or the data that you wouldn't want to get out, right? What we'll then do is we'll go talk to the CISO or the IT staff of those firms and make sure that their security posture meets or exceeds your own. That's the extent to how you can protect yourself from this. Obviously, we're not going to call BNY and be like, oh, so how's your cybersecurity? But like, there are families that are using small local lawyers, small regional banks that have questionable cybersecurity practices. Even small MFOs we've experienced have just abhorrent cybersecurity practices. I'm like, how can you work with families? Did they know? Are they not asking you these questions? So all of that needs to be looked at. And really, so the solution there is vendor risk management program, an inventory of your vendors, what they have access to, and is their cybersecurity good or bad? That's how you start. Yeah.
A little bit of a tough one, Tony, but effectively you probably gave these out during the course of our little over an hour conversation, but be prescriptive. If a principal watching this does nothing else this week, what are maybe the 5 things in order that buys the most protection for the least amount of effort?
Tough one. Find a capable managed service provider IT firm to keep all of your infrastructure up to date across everything you own. I don't care what it is, like your tablets, your iPhone, your laptops, all of your home infrastructure. Have them, if they're capable of doing that, otherwise there's certain other service providers do this, put next generation antivirus on all of these things. That's 1 and 2. The next one is educate all of your staff. Make cybersecurity part of your culture. Make everybody worried about it. Make everybody understand the ramifications of what they do with your data, because insider threats are a real thing, whether they're accidental or not. And then Lastly, I would say to add a layer of security on top of your email. So email is a huge point at which data is coming into your organization. You should not rely on like Google Workspace or Microsoft alone. You need another layer on top of that. I believe it's 5.
What does the most sophisticated family office in the world likely still get wrong as it relates to the issues we're talking about today around cybersecurity?
Yep. So we've come across some very sophisticated family offices where the cybersecurity program stops at the walls of the family office. And if that family office has a mandate to provide risk management services for the family, why aren't they protecting the family's personal devices in the family's homes? Doesn't make any sense. So especially when the family is like interacting with the family office from their home, which has insecure infrastructure. That's the main one.
And 5 years out, with superhuman AI on both sides of every attack, what's a durable advantage potentially at that point? And I know it's the crystal ball and we don't know in 1 year, let alone 5 years.
What a loaded question. I would say the advantage is to just stop using the internet. Just phone it in. Air gap yourself. I mean, there is, there are younger generations that are like not into social media as much as millennials were because they see the risk. They don't want to be out there and online all the time. And the mental health crisis is real and people are, taking a look back at times and saying like, maybe we don't have to be online all the time. Maybe I should touch grass more often, etc. So, I mean, that's obviously the nuclear option. We don't know where this thing's going to go. Obviously, in the next 5 years, it's going to blow up a lot of the job market. It's going to blow up the whole software world. We will not need SaaS providers anymore, software as a solution. The whole thing's like nobody knows what it's going to look like. I was at a family office event last year, and there was somebody from MIT speaking, and they were like, we can't even create curriculum to keep up with this stuff. All this stuff is being created like in dorm rooms by dudes crushing beers and creating startups and it's like that's where we're at. It's nuts. So no idea where we're headed. It's probably going, and the one thing he did say is all the models like 10 years out on what the world would be like after 10 years of AI, all he would say was that the world is going to be very weird. Like nothing looks the same. And as the job markets blow up, the wealth gap gets wider. I mean, there are some parts of that economic puzzle that don't look pretty. So let's hope that it is okay in the end.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the advent eventually when energy costs go to zero or near it, possibly due to fusion, robotics 10, 15 years out, there's billions of them, AKA labor goes to near zero. Everything, including capitalism as we know it, and you're talking to a hardcore, little bit of a redneck libertarian capitalist right here. You have to look at a little bit of reality. Yeah. And again, it's a crystal ball. I don't know, but you look at probabilities, at least I do, having a little bit of a mathematical sense and need to plan for this, although admittingly that's years out. Someone is asking a question, a good one that we didn't really have enough time to get to. Give me a little bit of a light answer to it. Effectively, it's Angelo. A lot of family offices are more intimate, AKA smaller, more remote. How do you talk about security for the principal around Wi-Fi connections relative to the family office people that are going to be remote, about having containers, controlling their phone, AKA and or a laptop, shutting it down when they're no longer there? We could do a 1 hour on this, but maybe give me 1 or 2 minutes about some safe protocols for more remote family offices.
Yeah, so most family offices are this way today. I would say, like, let's step back. Like, because you are only as secure as your weakest link, we should, and if we all agree with that, then the next step is to get a cybersecurity risk assessment performed. And that's going to show you where these holes are. So if this person that asked this is, has this remote situation, they're trying to protect things, the risk assessment would show what is higher priority? Is it the principal and the lack of maybe a secure web gateway or VPN? Is it the controller? Is it a number of different staff that are spread across the globe that are accessing systems without a VPN? Or is it, do we need to bring in like a VDI solution where you're logging into another computer to do your work? There are a bunch of different flavors of ways to like protect yourself, but we always say to start with a risk assessment, because you need to approach this holistically. A lot of families come to me and they say, I have this problem, or this is what I think my biggest risk is. And we always prove otherwise to them. And then we put together a plan to show them how to, in priority order, mitigate the risks. And it's not ridiculously expensive or ridiculously complicated. The barrier to entry is quite low. You just need someone in the room that could speak to all this stuff and understand the technology in a holistic manner.
Any specific opinion when you mention VPNs about like tail scale?
So the way most family offices we work with are using enterprise grade infrastructure. So they have like a Meraki system, or they have a FortiGate system, and the VPNs that those companies provide is usually quite good from a security standpoint for a family office. And then we often will pair that with single sign-on with Microsoft 365 and a YubiKey. So I mean that's where we usually head in that direction. But yeah, if you're DIYing a lot of infrastructure in your office with open source stuff, then Tailscale is a fine option as well.
And the last question, Tony, I promise, and let's have a little bit of fun with it. So we're going to go in a completely different direction.
Okay.
But I did notice that you have a background in cryptography. And I am going to have to ask you, I don't talk about it as much as I did 5 or 6 years ago, but come on, Tony, we have to have a little bit of fun with Bitcoin. Now we could get a little deep into US government involvement, SHA-256, that would involve some of your cryptography background, but broadly, Bitcoin, and I'm going to tie into you a subject we didn't touch. We just ran out of time, but it does tie into potentially a threat to Bitcoin and everything, and that's quantum. So I'm going to give the final 2 minutes before we close to you. Boy, you didn't expect this one. I'm throwing the curveball here on Bitcoin and quantum.
All good. And I mean, let's be honest. The whole question set has been a curveball, because I just received the questions this morning. Not to throw you under the bus, but no, it's been
the last second. I know
it's all good. It's been great to chat with you. It's been a great conversation. So the quantum threat's super interesting, and there's a little bit of some backstory to why we think this is an issue sooner than we all realize. So there have been nation-state governments stealing encrypted data for years. The Chinese have been stealing a ton of encrypted data from the US. And you might say, what the hell are they stealing all this encrypted data for? They're literally stealing we think in the industry that they're stealing encrypted data because the Chinese government will eventually, if they don't already have, a quantum computer that can decrypt it. And even if it's old, it might be useful, right? So because a lot of it's like government data. So quantum computers are going to very quickly break all the cryptographic mechanisms by which we encrypt our data. And we just need to up the ante from a mathematical perspective. AI is not going to make it any easier. There are probably mathematicians that are working on a completely new model for this using AI, but that's beyond me, and that requires a PhD. But anyway, even if your encrypted data was stolen, like they're thinking that it will be decrypted at some point in time. And then there's the cryptocurrency threat, right? Like, can a quantum computer break the encryption around the blockchain? And it's possible. And a lot of the developers that are developing the software that runs all the blockchains, they're working on this, as we speak, to make all of their cryptographic functions quantum resistant. And quantum resistant just means that the math is such that it would, even with a quantum computer, take many years to decrypt data.
Okay, I'm going to push you a little bit. And it's you could say, Angelo, it's none of your business. I keep that private. Tony, do you own Bitcoin?
Yes.
Okay.
And a couple other cryptocurrencies, and it's all on a hardware key, obviously, for security.
Okay. Well,
Your get.
thank you for sharing. On that note, before I give a little close, I want to give you the opportunity to maybe give a wrap to the conversation and share via social media, your website, your own email, whatever you want to do, how people can learn more about you and your firm.
Great. Thanks again for having me on. I've known Angelo for a number of years. I used to work at Family Office Exchange. I was with them for over a decade. And so I cut my teeth in the family office space, but have been advising families ever since. I left there in 2022. To reach us, you can hit up annapurnasecurity.com. It's ANNAPURNA security.com. It's a mountain range in Nepal, if that word is unfamiliar with you, for you. It's a really beautiful place on earth. And really, if you haven't taken a look at your cybersecurity or had a risk assessment performed in a number of years, it's time. Like there's no better time than now. Don't look back at this in 6 months and say like, oh man, like I really should have acted because now this has happened, or we didn't, or this happened. I don't know what to do. We can help you with all of those things. So we also are happy to just, if you're not ready for a full scale assessment, just to hit us up and we're happy to just point you in the right direction or get you started if you're very fresh, or if you're just starting your family office. We're working with billionaire families with hundreds of entities and hundreds of employees down to like small family offices. They're just getting started with 2 or 3 employees. We work with everyone from the family office standpoint. We're even working with families that don't have a family office, families that outsource everything to MFOs, helping them with their residential security, et cetera. So, happy to have that conversation. You can reach me at tony@annapurnasecurity.com. Happy to have a conversation.
You're so kind for sharing extra time today, Tony. It's been long coming. I'm so glad you had a chance to be on today. Everyone, I'm Angelo Robles at Family Office across most socials. You could go to angelorobles.com. Simply my name is my website. I guess I keep it simple. I'm the original founder, longtime CEO for near 2 decades at Family Office Association. Sold at, wish them the best, and have my own private intelligence and strategy community, call SFO Continuity, do some consulting to families. And obviously, I think everyone, at least who even once watched my content relatively recently, knows I'm extremely, extremely, extremely deep into the world of AI integration in a variety of ways for family offices, obviously including sovereign, which came up in our discussion today. But to be ignorant of cybersecurity concerns would be very ignorant and very foolish. And yes, in a world that we're in now with advancements in technology and AI, it does bring on more risks to families. There's no doubt about it. So henceforth, they're kind of married together. The AI native family office needs to be very much aware of cybersecurity risk and concerns, which are absolutely out there. And having a relationship with someone like Tony and having just simply him on the show today has been very, very valuable. Greatly appreciate it. Everyone do check out Tony's website and mine at angelorobles.com. If you're qualified, look forward to you becoming a member. And I still have one more block of a 2-day immersive masterclass this summer, August 12th and 13th in New York. You also become a member. You get access to all my proprietary content, my 2 AI books, other programs throughout the year, including other masterclasses. Like I've said in a variety of my programs, most, and I mean most, like 99% of family offices are nowhere near being really AI savvy and proficient. They're making a mistake. They're really missing out. And by the end of this summer, that's what the books in August 12th and 13th, and then you being hands-on, literally heading into Labor Day here in the US, you could literally, with no joke, be top 1% within the family office world. And if you're an executive, don't you want to help protect your position, your job, be more gainful, employable, have opportunities? Because the next, as Tony hinted, the next couple of years, specifically heading probably closer to 5 to 10 years out, are going to be very interesting. I don't know whether that's necessarily good or bad. None of us does. But you being aware of the risk, but also the opportunities and having the knowledge, and for now being a bit of a master of these programs, how is that ever going to be a negative to you? So you all know what to do at this stage. Tony, again, I hate to have kept you that extra couple of minutes for my little sequilatry there at the end, but I do appreciate
All good.
you. And thank you so much for being on the show. Everyone, have a great day and great week. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Angelo.
My pleasure. Thank you, Tony.